Welcome to Faith and Work. I'm Carol Evans, and I'm so glad you're here. This podcast was born out of a passion to help people live boldly in their faith while embracing the work you've been called to do. Whether that's a boardroom, a classroom, a kitchen, anywhere God's placed you, you carry a unique light. Right where you are, you have the power to reflect the love, hope, and compassion of Jesus Christ in a way that no one else can. Your job isn't just a job, it's a calling. In your faith, it's not separate from your work. It's woven right in the middle of it. So let's go. Let's talk faith, purpose, and let's live it out right where we are. Today I want to talk about a concept that has really revolutionized the way that I've lived over the last 10 to 12 years, and that is the importance of healthy conversation. Years ago, I was introduced to a book called Crucial Conversations, and that really jump-started my brain into thinking about how we have conversations. Now, the book was given to me because I was working on a project where I was having a lot of difficult conversations with customers. And at the time, that's really how I applied that knowledge. But over time, I read the book many times and then actually went on to be certified in teaching the class. And every time I think about tough conversations, it reminds me of all the different ways in life we can apply this, not just to work, not just with a tough project or customers who may or may not be irate about something, but really when you think about the importance of healthy conversation, sometimes conversations turn crucial because we've gotten in the habit of really unhealthy habits that lead to a lot of tough conversation, and not always. But what I noticed in my life was that there were two things specifically that I was doing that was lending itself to having tough conversations. And the first thing I want to talk about is how conversations can turn unhealthy when our intentions start to shift. So instead of listening to understand, we listen to respond and to prove that we're right. Instead of sharing something because our heart is heavy for someone or something, we share it because it's juicy, because it's interesting. Instead of admitting when we're the one in the wrong, we bring up something from the past that makes the other person look like the worst party in the conversation. Even though, if you're like me, sometimes mid-conversation with my husband, I'm like, oh, crap, he's right. And I know he's right. And it would be better if I just stopped and admitted it instead of bringing up something else that made him look worse. And that's when the conversation turns really, really tough, is when we bring in other things and our intentions start to shift. In Ecclesiastes 5:2, it says, "Be not rash with your mouth, and let not thine heart be hasty to utter anything before God. For God is in heaven, and you are upon earth, therefore let thy words be few." If we were saying this in today's vernacular, I feel like it would sound something like, just shut up. Sometimes we just keep talking, and we really need to just take a deep breath and understand that God knows everything that already happened. He knows everything that is about to be and everything that already was. When we feel the need and our intentions shift in the middle of a conversation, and we feel the need to jump in and defend ourselves, and we think, well, if I don't speak up for myself, who's going to speak up for me? And we can justify anything. And I'm not saying that we should never defend ourselves. But sometimes when the conversation turns unhealthy, we have unhealthy habits, it's not a matter of defending your honor. It's a matter of just being on defense and playing defense all the time. I'm 100% in support of speaking truth. But when speaking truth turns into disrespectful name-calling or labeling or jumping down someone's throat before they've even had time to explain, we've gotten into a really unhealthy habit. That's not good. When the rhythm of unhealthy conversations, when we get into the rhythm of unhealthy conversations, it impacts us with all types of conversations that we have. So for me, when I first read the book Crucial Conversations years ago, and I started thinking about how I was having conversations, it was really about work. But when you think about it, these conversations impact all areas of our life. They impact the conversations we have with other people. They impact the conversations we have with ourselves. And they impact the conversations we have with God. Because unhealthy habits, they don't know the difference. They take place in every type of conversation we have. When I think about running to defense, I can do that with myself. Even after the conversation, sometimes what impacts the conversation the most is not what is said in the middle of it. It's what we thought about after the conversation. It's what we thought about before the conversation. Have you ever been planning a conversation with somebody and you were mad just thinking about the conversation that was about to happen? And then sometimes you left a conversation and you think, that went so well. And then you finish the conversation and you hear back a week, sometimes a month later, that they left the conversation feeling frustrated. And then you think, well, what did they tell themselves after the conversation? Because I thought we left and everything was fine. And there's that internal dialogue, that internal self-talk that can harm us a lot when we get into unhealthy habits. So let's dive into that a little bit. The second thing that can get our conversations off track, the first thing was our intentions. The second thing we're going to look at is our emotions, and specifically unhealthy emotions. Emotions in a conversation are normal. That is very normal. But when we let unhealthy emotions drive our conversation, and we let unhealthy emotions drive the words that are coming out of our mouth, that's when it can turn really unhealthy. For example, if it's something with work, and maybe the last place that I worked brought in an outside vendor, and my job had been cut in the process because of cost or whatever. So I go to this new job and I see things happening. It is normal to feel fear from your past experiences. When it becomes unhealthy is when we let every conversation be led by fear, and we let that emotion drive our conversation. That's when it becomes unhealthy. And fear can be one. Our ego and our pride can be another one. If you've ever been in a conversation with someone and sometimes they bring up something that's almost a little bit embarrassing. Either it's a mistake that you made or it's something you should have known and you didn't know. And as soon as we feel that tinge of embarrassment, then pride can take over. And that ego it's like our chest puffs up and our shoulders get a little stronger. And that ego drives the conversation instead of admitting and saying, you're right, I should have known that. That was a simple, easy mistake, and I made that mistake. I remember years ago at work, I made a mistake, and I knew it was my mistake. I had delegated something to somebody, and they didn't get it done. So when the person who asked me to do it, I had to delegate it because I didn't have the right access to complete the task. They didn't know that. And they asked me to do it. They said it was time sensitive. I didn't have the access, so I delegated it to somebody else. The part that was the mistake is when I didn't follow up with that person. I should have followed up with them. I should have said, hey, did you get so-and-so done? Or when I first gave them the task, I should have said, this is time sensitive and it needs to be done by the next hour and a half or whatever. But I didn't. I just said, hey, can you get this done? I assumed they knew because of where the request was coming from. I told them where the request was coming from, and they didn't do it. And then 2 days later, someone reaches out to me and says, I thought you got that done. And I said, I did. And they said, no, you didn't, because I just got a call and it's still not done. And I went back to the person and I said, hey, did you get this done? And they said, oh, no, I realized I don't have the right access either, so I need to delegate it to somebody else. I just haven't had the time. And I said, hey, I'm so sorry. I should have mentioned this earlier. This is extremely time sensitive. And I had to go back to the person who originally told me what to do. And I had to say, hey, and they let me have it. They gave me an earful, but I deserved it because they were right. It was my fault. I had dropped the ball. I was the person that was supposed to be the supervisor, manager, and I dropped the ball. And I went back to him and I apologized. And I said, I can promise you that I won't make the same mistake twice. I will make other mistakes, I'm sure, but I won't make this same mistake twice. And we let it go. And I was talking to a friend of mine about it, and I was just kind of sitting back at my desk after that conversation, after everything was over. And I went back to sit in my desk, and I kind of just, I just felt like I'd gone 3 rounds in the boxing ring. And I just sat there, and a friend was sitting not too far from me. She said, "You good?" I said, "I just made a pretty big mistake." And the thing that I love about this story is that she never even asked me what mistake that I made. I work for a cell phone retailer, and she said, "Are we still selling phones, Carol?" And I said, "Yeah, we're still selling phones." And she said, "Okay then, learn your lesson and move on. Don't sit in it." And that was it. She turned around and she went back to work. And it was like, oh, it really is that simple. Now, at this point in my career, I had already had the class Crucial Conversations. I'm already a certified trainer in it. But the simplicity, it wasn't, in this particular moment, it wasn't about Crucial Conversations. It was about my self-talk that just about led me down a road of feeling sorry for myself. And when my friend turned around and said, "Hey, don't forget, we're still selling phones. So learn your lesson and move on." And she went back to work, and I turned around and I went back to work. And I have repeated that story so many times because it really did make such an impact on my life. It really did help me to get my thoughts together and say, okay, I'm going to learn from this. And I have learned from it. And I repeated it to other people who were stuck in that embarrassment of, I just made a mistake. Hey, and whether you're selling phones or you're flipping burgers or you're driving an Amazon truck or you're in an office, whatever you're doing, if you've made a mistake, learn your lesson and move forward. Don't let the embarrassment of that mistake drive that negative self-talk and drive you into the ground, and it can bury you if you're not careful. The other area that we see is how it impacts our conversations with God. If you've ever thought about the trend of your conversations in your prayer life with God, sometimes we can do a couple things with our prayer life. We can romanticize it, and we can enter into a prayer with something that sounds more like a poem. And if you had to ask us what we said, we wouldn't even be able to repeat it without looking at a piece of paper. And I'm not saying all of those types of formal prayers are bad, but when we get into a habit and either we're overly formal and we're not really truly authentic, or on the other side of things, we go to God with this idea that we are 100% the victim in every situation that happens. And that's not true either. When all God gets is our venting sessions, friends, there is a power in prayer that is just quiet and still. There is a power in prayer when it's just you talking to God, and then you just sit back and let Him talk to you. There's something about that that can't be mirrored anywhere else. And when we get in the habit of our emotions leading the conversations with God, and we tell Him how much we've been wronged and how terrible everyone else is in our life and how we are the victim here, when we do that, we are missing it. Because instead of we stop when we say, God, look at what they're doing and look at what they're doing and help them to see that I am the one in the right. And then we say, thank you, Jesus, amen. And we go about our day as if that's it. When instead, what if the next time we're having a venting session with God, we said, God, this is wrong and that is wrong. And I feel like I'm being falsely accused here, or whatever it is for you. And then you just sit back and say, God, help me. God, help me. I don't know what else to do. I am struggling and I don't know what else to do. Help me to give this anger, this jealousy, this pride, my ego. Help me to give it to you, God. Because help me to understand that I am not the only person that's hurting here. And when we lay it all down and then we just sit there, friends, for me, there's a special place in my office where I like to kneel down in prayer. It's just a special place for me. And I pray a lot in my car. Wherever it is for you, lay it all out there and then just sit in that stillness with him. And then just ask him, God, help me not to be driven by these emotions. Right now, I am filled with anger. Please help me. Lord, take this anger away from me. Help me not to live in it and to sit in it. I can't let my life be driven by this anger. And friends, there's something I want you to remember. If you're at a place where you can write it down, write this down. When our conversations are driven by unhealthy emotions, unhealthy relationships will follow. When our conversations are driven by unhealthy emotions, unhealthy relationships will follow. And that goes for work, that goes for yourself, the conversations you have with yourself, what you allow yourself to believe about other people and about yourself. And that goes for your relationship with God. It's so important. When unhealthy emotions drive our conversation with our friends, it can kind of sound like this. Well, it must be nice to. I bet she thinks she's better than us. They have no idea how hard I work. When we have unhealthy conversations with ourselves, it can kind of sound like this. I wonder if they really didn't mean that as a compliment. I wonder why I wasn't invited. You just don't fit in. You should probably stay home. With God, unhealthy conversations can sound like, God, show them that I'm right. God, you know this isn't my fault. How come they are being blessed and I'm over here struggling? Now, is it wrong to say those things? No, it is not wrong to say those things. When it becomes unhealthy is when then that is all that we say. And we stop right there. And it's just anger, 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 anger. Or fear. Friends, those emotions are normal. And those are not bad emotions. I don't want to paint the picture that emotions are bad. But when we don't give it over to God and say, God, this fear is keeping me stuck in a really bad place. I need you to help me with this. And maybe it's even praying, God, I know that some fear is healthy and some fear is not. Take away the unhealthy part of this fear. Help me to, there is a part of fear that is a gift that allows us to sense when things are not right. There's a healthy part of fear that allows us to not want to go back to places we've been. I'm not saying that. But when we are driven by fear or we are driven by our egos, that is when it can get in the way of healthy conversation. To get back to a healthy place, we can start by praying like David prayed in Psalm 19:14. When he said, let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. If you think about praying that over the conversations that you have today, for me, I keep everything organized by a calendar. And so when you're looking at your calendar or you're looking at your weekly agenda and you know there's some tough conversations, maybe even not tough conversations, just tough personalities to be around. Just pray over them. Lord, help the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart to be acceptable. O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer, redeem this relationship, redeem this conversation. Help us to stop it when it gets unhealthy. When we're in the middle of a juicy gossip session, or when your mind is playing tricks on you, when your marriage is filled with mostly brisk disagreements, and when your time with God is only ever filled with your venting on why you are the victim, then it's time to stop your brain from continuing down a path and start asking yourself some questions. The questions that we're going to talk about today, these questions are tools that I learned from Crucial Conversations. And maybe for you, it's different questions. These questions have been a huge help for me. Here's the three questions we're going to talk about today. What am I trying to achieve? What are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to achieve in that meeting that typically goes bad? What are you trying to achieve in your marriage? What are you trying to achieve with a friend? That there's a little bit of tension, you're not really sure where it's coming from. What are you trying to achieve? How would you behave if you really did? So think about that. If you really wanted unity in your marriage, how would you behave? If you really wanted a successful product launch, how would you behave in the conversation? Your ego has got to take a back seat. It doesn't matter if there's a lot of things in life where it matters when you're right. And there's a lot of things in life where it doesn't matter if you're right. So think about that. What are you trying to achieve, and how would you behave if you really did? With your friendship, I want healthy friendships. Well, then we have to act like it. We have to act like it, friends. The third question, what can I do right now to get back to a healthy conversation? What can I do right now to get back to a healthy conversation? Maybe if you're with a group of friends and you found out something really juicy about the person who sits 2 cubes over from you, maybe a thing to get back to a healthy conversation is not repeating the gossip. Maybe the thing to get back to a healthy conversation is to put your headphones on and just keep working. Maybe how you respond in a group text needs to change. And maybe instead of biting back with a sarcastic remark, you can say, hey, I know this has been a really stressful day for both of us. How about we talk about it over lunch today? Whatever it is for you, you know your calendar. You know the conversations you have coming up. You know the conversations you had last week that didn't go well. So ask yourself, what am I trying to achieve? And how would I behave if I really did? What can I do right now to get back to a healthy conversation? It is normal to feel fear and pride in our ego, but when we feel them, we have to call them out, hand it over to God, and say, God, I need you to take this over. I need you to help me. Just like in Ecclesiastes 5, we have to stop talking so much sometimes. There's been so many conversations when I think, man, Carol, you should have stopped talking about 5 minutes ago. You have just talked too much. You've either overshared or you've said things that are not helpful to the conversation. You've not added to the resolution here. You probably should just stop talking. Speak honestly to God about your doubts, your fears, your worries, and then be open when He answers. As soon as the Holy Spirit whispers in a still small voice, you don't need to add that. That's not important here. Then stop and call it out. If a friend says, oh, didn't you have something really juicy to share about so-and-so? Then just say, actually, that's not my story to share. You should probably just talk to them about it later, or wait until they're comfortable enough to tell you. I shouldn't have even offered that. My husband and I have been in the middle of conversations before, and because of being aware of conversations and because of talking about tough conversations at work in the best way possible, it's bled its way over to home. And I feel much more equipped, and I feel like I can go into conversations myself knowing a little bit more about what my triggers are, and I can identify as soon as I get to that healthy place. It's easier now than it was 10 years ago for me to identify when I'm letting myself get back into an unhealthy habit. But pray before you go into a tough conversation. Call it out with a friend. Say things like, I care about you. I know that this is a tough, hard subject, and I want to make sure that I can share my perspective in a respectful way, and I want to hear what you have to say. There have been times when David and I were in the middle of a conversation, and it got off the rails a little bit. And one of us now, because I've talked about conversations so much, sometimes David will say, didn't you say we're not supposed to say that? And I'm like, yeah, you're right. He'll remind me of it. He'll totally remind me of it and calls me out, which is great. But sometimes I've had to say, babe, can we restart? I let this get off the rails whenever I started bringing up things from the past that weren't relevant to this conversation, and I'm sorry about that. I let my defenses go up, and I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry. Let's just talk about what it is we're trying to talk about and get back to what it is that we really mean. What are we trying to achieve? 3 things to remember about today. When our conversations are driven by unhealthy emotion, unhealthy relationships will follow. Pray like David over your conversations. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O God. The last thing, ask yourself some questions to get back to a healthy conversation. There's so much more we could say about conversations, but I want to keep it brief today. And if you've got time left before you jump out the car to work or before you log off and you start your working day, think about the conversations you have coming up and think about the questions you need to ask yourself to get back to a healthy conversation. For me, it's those questions of what am I trying to achieve here? And what do I need to do to behave like that really is what I want? And what can I do to get back to a healthy conversation? Those are the questions I ask myself. Maybe for you, it's different questions. Think about the conversations you've got coming up. Pray over them. Pray over those conversations. I would love to hear your feedback. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope this has been helpful. I'm praying for you. I look forward to seeing you again next week. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of Faith at Work. If today's conversation encouraged you, I would love for you to share it with a friend or a coworker. And I would love to hear what you think. So you can text me at 615-669-3209. I would love to hear your thoughts, your feedback. And if you have questions that you would like answered on a future episode, leave me your name and the city and state that you are reaching out to me from. That number again is 615-669-3209. I would love to hear your thoughts. I look forward to being with you again next week. Until then, let's keep living out our faith at work.